Yeah, so very good morning, everyone. Thanks, Sharon, for that introduction. And I hope you're all having a good Sunday. So, is the slideshow on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. So, I think the job of ROAR is really commendable. They've been organizing the series of webinar on, butterfly conservation. And when Sharon approached me that, I have to give a talk on media and butterfly conservation, I told him that I'm really not a technical person to talk about butterflies. But then, there's always a non-technical side to anything. So likewise, this, presentation is going to be about the non-technical side of conservation itself and how it is even more relevant for butterfly conservation. So as Sharon said, like I've been working with the Hindu, and very recently, I think not more than 6 years ago, I developed some interest about butterflies, and that was because Sharon, he was the one who first came and met me in the office, and when he told that he wants to put a write up about butterflies. I was like taken aback. I was like, what's special about butterflies? Because even as a media person, I must admit that we would always be excited to talk about tigers or elephants or even birds, but not as much about butterflies unless you have a niche interest in it. So that is being honest about every media person out there. So as a media person, like I slowly started developing interest, and I started understanding also about the importance of butterflies, because as a lay person, not everyone understands the ecological importance of butterflies. So let me go into the PPT. So let's see like how the mainstream media has been portraying butterflies and butterfly conservation as a subject. So if you actually see, to be honest, only in the last 5 to 7 years, butterflies have become a subject in the mainstream media, at least in India. I mean, I don't know about the international media, but if you ask me, as a media person or as a person who worked in newspapers, butterflies do not really find as much space as tigers or elephants or even birds in the mainstream media. The talk about butterflies is still quite restricted to the English media. Yes, that's very true, and especially newspapers. You don't see much of it in the local media. You don't see people talk about you don't see much articles about butterflies in the vernacular media. There's always more in the English media. So that, which is also an indicator that we have not really penetrated the subject of butterfly conservation, has not really penetrated media as of yet. And we don't see much about butterflies on the news channels, not at all. On TV, it is only restricted to environment channels. I mean, you may have programs about butterflies on, say, Animal Planet or like National Nat Geo or like Discovery, but then you don't see much in the news channels. But then often you would see like elephants migrating from one place to another, and then because and the news is more about conflict. The news more revolves about elephant conflict, or say a tiger venturing into the village and killing people, or like even positive stories. You will see more about birds, migratory birds visiting a particular landscape, or like there's an increase in tiger population in the Mudumalai National Park. Stories on those lines, but then you really don't see any stories about, say, butterflies on the TV. But then, like, off late, I see one positive thing is that the butterfly enthusiasts, say, like, people like Roar or Sharon or anyone out there, they have harnessed social media to a greater extent. There are pages about butterflies now. There are pages even in vernacular languages about butterflies. You have a lot of people who become members in the page and who get to know a lot about butterflies, which is a good thing. So this might pave way for butterflies becoming a subject in future in newspaper. So I would say, like, butterflies are yet to penetrate the mediascape in a big way. There's really there's really a long way to go for butterflies and people working with butterflies, people working for butterfly conservation. So like, one thing is, in India, we there's, I mean, not many people even consider butterflies as part of wildlife, isn't it? Like, whenever you say the word wildlife, you always conjure up images of mammals. Of course, insects themselves, like, insects come at the last, and butterflies are one of the least. When you say wildlife, you think of mammals mostly, but then technically insects are indeed a part of wildlife. So when we talk about wildlife conservation, we talk about the whole ecosystem, and butterflies are indeed a very important part of the ecosystem. But then, in the mediascape, the word wildlife, the term wildlife, becomes largely restricted to just a couple of species, and butterflies is really in the last rung. And one reason is because butterflies are still largely a niche field of interest. Not everyone is so enthusiastic about butterflies. Say even a layperson would like to read a news item about a tiger. Say a layperson would like to read a news item about a leopard or an elephant, but then not everyone reads about butterflies. So that is one hiccup which probably needs to be addressed in a very different way, because butterflies still are a very niche field of interest. And there's also another reason why it still remains a niche field, is because unlike mammals and birds, butterflies have not yet become a popular subject for photography. See, I would say, like, 30 years ago, say 25, 30 years ago, you wouldn't have found much news item about even tigers on the newspaper. The idea of reporting about environment was itself largely absent from the mediascape. Stories about wildlife, stories about environment was largely absent, like, say 25 years ago, unless it is a major crime. Say so many tigers were like poached, or like tiger skin was confiscated, or like elephant tusks were confiscated. These were just the news items. I mean, there wouldn't have been stories about wildlife conservation or environment conservation, say 25 years ago. But then now every big newspaper has a reporter dedicated almost to the environment beat. They have a beat called environment beat. So so that's how, like, subjects evolve on the newscape. So, and one reason for wildlife becoming a popular subject even in the mainstream media is wildlife photography. So there's a huge boom in wildlife photography, and that is one of the reasons that triggered like most stories in the mediascape about wildlife and environment. I mean, I wouldn't say they're all stories on the serious note, that talks about conservation in the real aspect and spirit, but then there was at least stories that were worded in a very leisurely and a very leisure read, that was worded for a leisure read, if not a serious article. So that's how things start. That's how a subject penetrates media stream. So that is one reason. Maybe not many photographers are still into butterfly. A lot of wildlife photographers these days, they're still behind tigers and elephants. And I think there's a need for photographers to look towards butterflies, which might trigger a popular which might trigger a popularity for butterflies in the mediascape. And even news about butterflies has remained more technical. So this is one reason, and hence has not yet captured popular interest of the general public. So if you ask me, when actually, for instance, even Sharon, when he met me the very first, I think that was in 2014, or even earlier, I'm not very sure, when he told me about butterflies. So I couldn't actually comprehend much of it, because it was quite technical. For a lay media person, butterflies still remain a very technical part of conservation. So there's a need to simplify, and Sharon was good at it. So that's how the first article in the Hindu about butterfly, which I wrote, came about. So like simplify it and angle it to the popular interest of the general public. It need not be very technical. I mean, I understand conservation is a technical and a scientific activity, but then there is a need to break it down for the general public on the larger media, in order to make it a subject of popular interest. And that is the first entry point of a subject into the mainstream mediascape. Now, when we talk about articles about butterfly conservation in media, I'm not talking about the scientific journals, or I'm not talking about magazines, periodicals that are dedicated to conservation. I mean, those again become a very technical space. You have a set target audience for those who regularly subscribe to those journals and periodicals. And and largely your reach remains quite restricted to the technical people. So this, I'm talking about the mainstream media, wherein you're putting out articles in the newspapers and in the TV channels. So today you would see almost every day there's a news about birds migrations. There's a news of, if you take a Tamil TV channel, they'll talk about valasai paravaigal, migratory birds coming here, coming there. There's news about a tiger, every third day. There's news about elephant every single week. So that's how popular wildlife and environment has become as a subject. So how do we find space for butterflies in the mainstream media? So when we talk about role of media in butterfly conservation, media's role in any conservation is inevitable, because media is one channel to gain attention of the general public, gain attention of the policy makers, gain attention of the lawmakers, of the court, everyone. We had experiences. Say there was a, from my personal experience, if you ask me, there was this particular there was this particular water body on the outer ring road in Madurai city that was leading to the Madurai airport. And this particular water body would attract a lot of birds every single year. So you'll have like birders all the time organizing bird walks there. So but then what happened was, after a few years, some part of the city's sewage was channeled towards that particular water body, and then the birders raised concern about this. And we almost ran it as a campaign. We did a series of articles on how this landscape is crucial for migratory birds in the city, and why this should be stopped, why the sewage should be stopped from entering the water body. And we almost ran it as a campaign, like say periodically we kept writing about it. And it caught the attention of the district collector, and there was finally some action taken. So the role of media in localized conservation, I'm not talking about large conservation goals like say, increasing tiger population with a target in these many years. These are achieved by very technical conservation efforts. But then like, small localized conservation goals, like say saving a water body in your city, saving a particular patch of, forest in your neighborhood, saving a small hillock in your neighborhood. These kind of small conservation goals can definitely be achieved through media. And media attention is important for taking this to the policymakers. So that way I believe, like butterflies, the role of media and butterfly conservation is very important. And in order to harness the media, in order to make use of media, there's also a need to make butterflies more relatable to a lay reader and the mainstream media. See, now people can relate to wildlife to an extent, they can relate to birds to an extent, but I think very less people can still relate to butterflies. But butterflies are so much part of our lives. We see them every day. We see them on the road, on the sides of the road. Even when you walk, they flutter across. But then how much thought an average person does really spare, towards butterflies? I mean, almost no. But then when you see a parrot fly across, you do spare a thought for it. You do talk about it. Oh, there's a parrot. But then when a butterfly, it's just taken for granted. So I think there is a need to make it more relatable, in terms that there is a need to redefine the relationship between butterflies and people in general, and and the mainstream media also. So the thing is, like, bring in more colors to the subject, as in, like, of course butterflies are colorful themselves, but then, like, there's a need to bring in more colors to the subject of butterflies conservation. For instance, I would say if you want to put out an article in the local newspaper about butterfly conservation, they may not be really interested. But then if you tweak it a bit and say, if you're approaching a local newspaper, say a Tamil newspaper like Dinamalar or Dinatandi, say that you want to put out an article on references to insects and butterflies in Tamil Sangam literature, then the reporter might be interested, because then that makes it more relevant to the audience. So these are, some ways of bringing in colors to butterfly conservation, wherein, like, you branch out a bit and, go a little into the overlapping areas, and connect butterflies to various things. Say here we connect butterflies to Tamil literature, for instance. Then that makes for a very interesting story. Even as a media person or reporter, I would be interested in doing that story. So that is how probably the subject has to be tweaked to first gain foothold and space, in the mainstream media, both in newspaper and TV channels. This is just a, I mean, wild example that I gave. It doesn't just have to be this, it could be anything. It could be about, say tribal songs about butterflies, like if there are any, if you have. So I would suggest that people working in butterfly conservation, like you all, like, you're all technical people, you all know about the different kinds and species, and families of butterflies, the behaviors, everything. But I would also suggest, you do a little bit of research on the overlapping areas. Do a little research on the literature about butterfly, do a little research about the tribal songs, this, that, areas around, and connect butterfly to those subjects in order to make it as an interesting thing for media people and also the general public. That could be a very different and a very variety platter, to be presented, and butterflies could go a long way that way, in reaching the target audience. Then, an example is like a story on how to attract more butterflies to your backyard. Like, say, talk about host plants, because see, when you're talking about backyard, you're talking about gardening, and gardening is a common interest, is a much larger interest, area of interest for people. So, when you connect butterfly with gardening, talk about what kind of host plants. We did a story about this when I was working in the Hindu. I think I did get some inputs from people like Sharan and other butterfly enthusiasts on what kind of plants could be, planted in your backyard in order to attract more butterflies. And that story did well. It got a lot of likes, and people actually started looking forward to more such stories. So that's how sort of bring butterfly into the everyday conversation of people. And then, like, how butterfly watching could be beneficial to the mental health. I mean, this is just a wild example that I'm giving. For instance, if you ask me, like, bird watching was not really popular, say, a decade ago. Bird watching was very much a very niche field, like, say, 10 years ago, or like 7 8 years ago. Not everyone took to bird watching, because birds were again very small, like small, difficult to spot, they were difficult to capture on camera, they would fly away, you need patience, all of that. And people were only talking about tigers, elephants, big animals. But then, like, now you have a real boom in birders. There's a lot of bird watching happening even in campuses, college campuses. There's a lot of bird watching happening in school campuses. There are youngsters who are taking to bird watching. Like, it's become really popular. So that's how probably butterfly watching could also evolve in future as an activity. I don't know what technical term you would use for butterfly watching. So, if there are any, I mean, you can share that. I will be willing to learn. So, like, people, that's how you sort of engage people and, make it more interesting for the larger audience. And now when we talk about butterfly conservation, then we also talk about, say, very serious, subjects like, conservation itself is a serious aspect. It comes in as a serious aspect. So when we talk about leisure articles, that is different. But then when we talk about, articles aimed for conservation, articles that create awareness, then, you have to cash in on the ecological importance of butterflies. Tell media people on why it is important to conserve butterflies. Now everyone knows why it is important to conserve tigers, why it is important to conserve elephants, why it is important to save elephant migratory paths. So, likewise, but then not everyone knows why it is important to save butterflies. Like, I mean, people may think, oh, what's there big about butterflies? I mean, what happens if they become extinct? Like, not everyone knows about the seriousness of butterfly conservation. So there's a need to, drive home that point as well. So, you could, like, bring in the points like how butterflies are indicators of biodiversity or like healthy ecosystem. So, I mean, these may sound like a very general line, but then, like, all the media persons want is, things like this, indicators of biodiversity. So then, that becomes a key word for the entire article. So an entire article could just be done on that. Why butterflies are indicators of biodiversity? Why only them? Like, what is there? Like, if there are more butterflies present in an area, then what does it indicate? Then it indicates there's good river health system, whether it indicates good soil, whether it indicates good climate. So, on those lines, there could be even a, serious conservation angled article on this. Package articles on why it's important to conserve butterflies. So exactly the same thing. And So we did one article, wherein I did a series of articles on hotspots for butterflies in southern Tamil Nadu. So like say, this these might interest people, because we ran a local supplement which was metroplus, which just circulated amongst 4 or 5 districts. So when you talk, when you can focus on those geographical areas. Say people working for butterflies in Karnataka could just put out articles, about 4 or 5 districts, about a small region in Karnataka, about a small region in Tamil Nadu, like how many butterflies varieties you find there, what are the hotspots in that region. So we did a story on southern Tamil Nadu and butterflies, wherein we focused on just 10 districts and how, what all kind of butterflies you find in these districts, and what are the hotspots, butterfly hotspots in these districts. I mean, the chances are that some of these hotspots could be just open areas, and the public will get more interested in this. There could be people who really go to that place and start butterfly watching, and they come back and I've gotten a lot of mails, feedback mails from my readers saying that all the butterfly articles are making for a real good read, and how they need more butterfly articles. That's when like you really make a connection with readers. So I think this is more important, discover and share more hotspots with media and highlight the need to preserve those landscapes. So this way the landscape also gets protected. Say there could be just a small hillock in your neighborhood just by the city, and if you suddenly discover more butterflies there, then there could make a very good interesting news article that could also pave way for the conservation of that particular hill. It's not just about conservation of the butterflies, then that whole hill can be protected. When there are repeated articles about that place, people will be going more to see that place. There'll be less antisocial activities taking place in that place. So there are chances for that. So that's how media helps you achieve localized conservation. I'm sorry. Yeah. And talk about threats to butterflies. I think this is really underrepresented. Even in the articles that I wrote, I would have written about say 2 dozen articles about butterflies, but then this particular aspect, I think even my articles have not covered. This is really an underrepresented subject. Threats to butterflies and the landscapes they inhabit. Say, what are the threats to butterflies? I think only once someone touched upon a point that, like highway traffic. Highways are a threat to butterflies because when the mass migration happens from one side to the other, a lot of butterflies get hit by the windshields in the vehicles and they get killed. I'm not sure how far that is. Is that Sharon? Yeah. So, hello, hello. Am I audible?
No, you're audible now. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So, I think this particular subject is really underrepresented. So I would suggest people working in butterfly conservations like you people to actually talk about threats to butterflies and the landscapes and put out articles in the media. The media people will be really interested to take something like this, and the future impacts if the threats are not combated. What happens if butterflies become extinct? Talk on those lines. Like we see articles about what happens when bees become extinct. We have seen articles about what happens when frogs become extinct. So we could also put out articles about what would happen when butterflies become extinct. Not really many people know about this, but you could always postulate possibilities and talk about the future impacts. That sort of like drives home the point of the need to butterfly conservation. Make more noise and ensure regular periodical butterfly stories in the media. Campaign for more attention and understanding. So this periodical stories, regularity is what I was stressing even earlier. So you would see one tiger story every 3 days, one elephant story every week. Any newspaper you pick up, you would see one bird story every 2 weeks. So I think as people, as group working for butterfly conservation, you all should ensure that you give one story about butterfly in the mainstream media at least once a month. People should regular it should I mean, a subject should regularly hit the reader in order to sort of make a difference in the long run. Okay. So in order to do all this, I think the very first step is to make a connection between butterflies and media persons, first of all. So I'll tell you, as a reporter, as a media person, everyone is blank about butterflies. Even people who work in media, they really don't have much idea about butterflies or butterfly conservation. I mean, accepted that it's a niche field, but then like media people are also multitasking people, so they know about everything, but then you need to tell them what it is. And so there are ways to do it. Say for instance, organize regular butterfly walks and rope in media people, and start off as a casual weekend engagement. Let them first assimilate and understand the world of butterflies. For instance, roar is organizing roar, of course, like butterfly walks and all that. For instance, if they're organizing butterfly walks, then always inform the local media person and ask them to join you guys for that, short butterfly walk. Make it experiential for them. And you need not expect them to first put out an article on the very first walk. Just wait for them, let them like keep coming for butterfly walks in the first 2 3 walks, and definitely they may make a story after the third or fourth walk. That's how things happen. That's how you make me sensitize media people towards conservation. That's how it happened for bird conservation also. Like for instance, when there was this Mother in Nature Forum group, so when they organized bird watching walks, for the first 3 or 4 walks, I kept going, and there were a couple of media people who kept coming, but then they wouldn't really write anything. But then after the fourth or fifth walk, there would be a really nice positive story out in the paper. That because that makes it more experiential for them. That makes them write in the fourth or fifth walk. You really don't have to ask them to write. It will happen on its own, because they also gain awareness about the particular species, awareness about the issue, awareness about the place, everything. And I mean, take butterfly events to families or children units. So butterfly, I think, in a way, scores more than the other species because it is more likable, it's more colorful, and there's a chance of children getting attracted to butterflies more than anyone else. So you could always target the events towards family and children units. I'm sure you're all technical people, you all go as a group and do a lot of research on butterflies and everything. But that aside, I would suggest groups like roar and other conservationists who are working on butterfly conservation, take butterfly as a subject to families and children units. Like organize butterfly walks in schools and colleges, or take families to nearby neighborhoods where which are like butterfly hotspots. It could be a Sunday morning activity, it could be a weekend activity, which goes a long way in inculcating interest among them. And naturally they will look forward to read stories about butterflies in the media. So that's how we actually, I saw a community of birders develop in Madurai, a small town, where like 10 years ago there was absolutely no awareness about birding. But now there's a very active but a small buzzing community for birding in Madurai, and that all happened this way. There were regular butterfly walks and there were regular stories in the newspaper. So a particular segment of people kept reading the articles, and then there was a larger awareness, and now you have Pongal, bird count, this, that, everything happening. So that's how like I think butterfly will also evolve in future, surely. But then like these are some ways, because children definitely are target points for butterflies. um, I think one of the professors in the American college also did a butterfly park inside that college campus, and it went a long way. Even schools took students for days excursion inside the college to, every school took their children to just visit the butterfly park. So and of course, every time there was a school visiting the butterfly park, there was a report in the paper, local paper. So that's how there's more footprint, there's more foothold of the subject in the, you get more foothold of the subject in the mainstream media. Simplify the subject in Tamil for the vernacular media persons. I mean, not just Tamil. I've just written here Tamil because I'm based in Madurai. But then, like, it could, simplify the subject in vernacular language, for the people, because often conservation itself is seen as an elite subject, and hence local media report off. This is so true. Even birding, for instance, first started off with the English media only, because the local media persons, they think conservation is a very elite subject. It is only for people who are elite, and even the readers who have the time and the leisure to read about these subjects, only they read. So it's very difficult to get attracted to butterflies. local media reporters to say report about butterflies or birds. They think these are issues that are not so important. Like what's so big about butterflies? So there's a need to, like make simplify it for them, and say that okay, this is also important to be put out in the paper. It might start off as a two-column report, don't worry, and then like over the time, it may become a half-page article also. It depends on how much information you give and how much and photographs, of course. Like photography is a very important part, to get articles published in the media. Then club larger conservation goals and needs to butterflies and present it as a single whole story for media person. So I would suggest, you know, uh, instead of talking just about butterflies, as I told you, butterfly is still a niche field of interest. Not everyone relates to it. So club butterfly conservation with larger conservation goals. Talk about the whole landscape. So that's how we did it. So my most of my articles, would make butterfly as a center stage, but also touch upon the nearby other areas of interest. Say for instance, when I'm talking about Sirumalai is a small isolated patch of hillock near Madurai city. So like we did a story about butterflies in Sirumalai. So it was not just about butterflies, it was also about Sirumalai, why it was important to conserve Sirumalai, and what are the other animals that inhabit there, and how butterflies, I mean, how many species of butterflies are found there, on those lines. So club it with larger conservation goals. So Sharon wanted me to share some of my media cuttings. So I don't really have any media cuttings. I have not saved them. So I've just taken screenshots from the online, website of the Hindu. Um, so this is one story that I did in 2017. It was just about, I think the inputs were provided by Sharon only. So we have this Alagar Hills, which is a nice hillock near the Madurai city. So I mean, we have written so many articles about Alagar Hills. I mean, we have written articles about it as a weekend getaway. We have written articles about the temples there. We have written articles about the trek routes there. But so unfortunate that we have really not written anything about butterflies in Alagar Hills. So when the subject came about, I was so excited that, oh my god, we never really thought about butterflies in such a popular place. And we did a story, and it was an instant hit. We got a lot of readers who got back saying that, oh, we never knew that there's so many species of butterflies that live in the Alagar Hills. And a lot of people actually went to the Alagar Hills and spent time watching butterflies. I mean, it could not be any. I mean, they need not have any technical knowledge about butterflies, but it's just about popularizing the subject among the audience. So this is again one article for which inputs was provided by Roar. So this was about how the Tamil yeoman became the state butterfly of Tamil Nadu. This article, for instance, was a combination of technical facts and some interesting quotes from the people who worked for it. So articles like this could also make a very good read, because when they told like, okay, this particular butterfly belongs to this particular family, this is this color, the measurement is this, the habitat is this, the behavior is this. So all these are technical indeed, but then these can go in as very interesting infographics on the newspaper. People also look for this, media persons, they also look for info like this, which can be given as a small table for readers, which can be given as a small infographic, which readers also consume on the go. And these may interest children also, and even parents. We after all my butterfly articles, I had gotten a couple of feedback mails from readers who were parents, saying that, oh, these articles, your articles about butterflies, they're very informative and educative for the children. So I make my son or daughter go through it, look forward to it every week. So that's how you cash in, and there's a regularity now. So every Friday, okay, there'll be a story on butterflies, so the parents look forward to it and make the child read it. So that awareness also builds up. Of course, there's awareness, and there's also regularity, and there's also the subject becoming popular among the family units. So this happens over the time. Yeah, and this story was about the I mean, Madurai Nature Forum, which was going to document diversity of butterflies in the city. So this was like one of the first articles that I had put out sometime in 2014 or 13. I was not very sure, but then, like there was some effort towards that. Was the first effort towards butterflies, becoming a subject among conservationists in that city. This was again about butterfly enthusiasts identifying new and rare species of butterflies. Like people like Sharan and some of his friends who were very interested. They would always be excited each time they saw something new. Each time they recorded something rare, they would always get back to us. Saying that Anna, I found this, I found that. Can there be an article on the paper? Like this also becomes a personal rapport also, like over the time you also make sure that the reporter who looks after the environment beat, he I mean, I was the one who looked after environment beat in the Hindu Madurai when I was there. So I always look for subjects that are different, and it happens with every environment reporter. So the need is to identify a person, in the local media population there, in the local reporters in your city or town, to like the one whom you would approach, and he becomes a regular, to put out stories because he understands the subjects also. So that's very important. So this was a story with just about like rare species of butterflies, and how it has become a thing among the youth in the city, in the region, like that. And here someone like there was this person, TV Pranav, I think he's a friend of Sharon. So he had actually documented the butterfly transforming from a caterpillar into a butterfly in his camera in his backyard. So that was something, you know and this story I remember, like people his age, like people the age of these guys, Sharon and Pranav, who were in the college, who were in high school, they got back saying that, oh, this is something interesting that I would also like to do, because everyone has a backyard, and it's something like that can do sitting in the house. Yeah. Then we did a story on butterflies from the Parani Hills, which is again, see again, Parani Hills is a very popular destination. Kodaikanal becomes a part of Parani Hills. When we did this story, a lot of people got back saying that we keep going to Kodaikanal, we keep going to Parani so many times. Almost twice a year, everyone goes to Kodaikanal in Madurai. But then, like they don't really spare a thought for butterflies there. I mean, it's just about sightseeing and coming back. But then, like when this article was put out, I think this was a 3-part series wherein we put out 3 articles about butterfly species found in Parni Hills. It was also a bit technical, but then like I angled it as a travel story, wherein like if you're going to the Kodaikanal on a weekend, then don't miss out on visiting this particular pocket there where you may find a lot of butterflies. So, and indeed people visited those pockets, and they spent time, and they got back saying that, oh, this was a lovely thing to do on a weekend. So like, I mean, you're giving something about butterflies, but then angle it as a travel story. Angle it as a story that you must do on a weekend. Give some color to it. So that's how you package articles. So let me say, like it's not just about butterfly conservation, but any conservation. In media starts off as feature articles, starts off as articles angled for leisure reading, and then slowly evolves into a serious subject on the media, in the newspaper. Now you may see even technical articles on tigers. There are technical articles written about experts, authored articles written about experts on elephants, tigers. But then, like, say 10 years ago, it was not so. It was only about yeah, people going to Tadoba and picturing tigers. Those would have been the articles. But now they have also evolved into a more serious and a more meaty subject. So that's how probably butterfly should also evolve in future into a more meaty subject, than just being a um, leisure article. But right now I think the entry point is features, because I was a feature writer. So there's more opportunity in feature sections to put in butterfly conservation. And later, probably, when technical people like you have developed a rapport with a media person or a media house, then you can also put out authored articles which are technical about butterfly conservation. So this was again one story, very interesting story about this old couple who lived near the Madurai city. They had a weekend home, and they had a garden uh, which had a lot of butterflies. So someone from a zoology professor had visited them, and he had documented some 2 dozen species of butterflies in their small garden. The garden was not more than 20 cents, but then they had 2 dozen species, which is 24 species of butterflies visiting them. So this was something very interesting. And when I did a story about this, there was a whole group of people, that developed a very active group of people started developing, who all visited them and started taking inputs from them on what plants to be grown in the backyard to attract butterflies and all that. And like people who had weekend homes away from the city, they all started cultivating planting plants that may host plants for butterflies, and they would come back saying that now I have so many butterflies here, this that. They would send pictures. So these are all like, they do make a small difference. Articles and media does make a very small difference, but then a large impact also later. Yeah, so thank you all. Hope this session was informative and interesting. Hope it was not boring. I'm sure Sharon would have expected a longer talk, but I think this subject is also quite technical for me, and I think I've covered most of the aspects.
Thank you so much, Shrikumar. It wasn't boring. Trust me, and you have covered everything, whatever I need you to convey to the viewers. You have covered everything. It was
Sure.
really a wonderful session. So now
Thanks,
we'll
Sharon.
go.
Thank you so much. And in case if anyone is willing to discuss or ask any questions, also I'm willing to. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You can stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
Participants, if you have any questions, please send in the chat channel, or you can click on the raise hand button. I'll just unmute you so that you can ask questions if you have. Now I'll just open up the chat window just to.
Okay, there are a couple of messages in the chat window already.
Okay, someone said in our college campus, many butterflies got killed by the windshield.
Windshield. Oh, that's sad. So
But
yes, so I think college and school campuses, even from my experience, they have become a huge space for birds and butterflies of late. People like Sharan and others who are in that age group, because I think when Sharan met me, he was a student of Tyagaraja Engineering College in Madurai, right?
yeah, I think that was
So
in 2013 or
yeah,
2014.
2013 or 2014. So people that age, are like really become more sensitized of late towards butterflies and birds, especially, which are the even among the wildlife fraternity, these two are the most niche. Even birds have become more common now, but butterflies are still niche. So that's like really nice. Yeah, I think every city, people who are working, I'm sure people here are from different cities. So people who are working for butterflies in different cities, I think colleges and schools are like really starting point. You must all like work with college campuses and school campuses to start off butterfly walking as an activity, regular activity, maybe once a month on a weekend. And probably that's a nicer way to pull in media, their local media, in those places towards butterfly conservation. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have one question. Nowadays, a large number of pesticides are used and a large number of butterflies are killed. What can you say about whether or not to use pesticides for agriculture practices?
Okay, so this is a nice question, but then I can't really say about pesticide usage and agriculture practices because I'm not a technical person. But then this can actually make a nice story. see again, this can make a very good story in the media. If you're a person, say Dhyaneshwar Rahel, if you're a person who is working for butterfly conservation in a particular place, and if you want to highlight this, issue of pesticides being used in agriculture and that is impacting butterflies, then probably you should, ask a reporter to do a story on this, give him more inputs on this. This can actually make a very good story. Any reporter would be interested in doing a story on this. Yeah.
Okay. So people, if you have any questions, please send in the chat window. Or if you want to talk, I'll just unmute you. Okay. So we'll just wait for a couple more minutes. If there are no
Sure.
questions, we'll just wrap it up.
Sure.
But I'm happy I kept this talk in the last to finish it off in style, because people need to know the importance of media than just to post pictures in social media handles, which doesn't help much.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, like that's how, I mean, it was earlier, even with species like tigers and elephants and, other popular species that have gained, food space in media now. So that's how it starts, but then it shouldn't get stopped there.
Yeah,
So, social media is indeed a great tool. Like, like that's how I said, like, you people, you have created pages for butterflies and all that. That's
yeah.
really good. But then that's a nice way to enter the mainstream media, which is what makes a difference. Yeah. So, keep sharing stories about, butterflies in your local media. Like, for instance, this usage of pesticide is a very interesting angle to explore, even as a report in the mainstream media. If you have enough, like substantial facts to, back up this, if you have enough research in hand, then you should, approach a reporter, give him more inputs and say why it is important to cover, like how it is impacting butterflies. Because sometimes, see, this is a very what to say, a double-sided sword, I would say, because sometimes butterflies are also considered as pests for agriculture. So, you need to take a very clear and a very diplomatic tone to put this out in the newspaper. Yeah.
So I think we don't have to delay. Okay, one last text. We can use media for telling to use some natural ways to treat insects and pests.
Absolutely. So that's what I said. Like, if you have enough, technical details and research backup with you, say instead of using this pesticide, if you can suggest some natural, repeller or like a natural plant that repels, you know, something like that, then you can very well, put that out in the media, like ask reporters to put that out in the media. That'll be an interesting article to do.
Yeah, so I'd like to end it here. So before I end, thanks again, Shikumarna, for finishing it off and be part of this your talk series on behalf of and on the occasion of Big Butterfly Month, India 2020.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much. And thank you and Roar for giving me this opportunity.